Hello everyone, I'm Geetmalasarkar and today we will be painting the second half of the Hollyhock flower. This is the second and last part which we are doing, and although I have compressed some of the parts of this Hollyhock flower, the techniques which I have used, I am demonstrating all the techniques, but then some of you may need little more time to complete this and some of you may need little less time depending upon the stage at which you are working. And we can do glazing only, as you know, only when the first layer dries out. That is why I had to compress this video so as to excuse the time it took for the hollyhock to dry up in parts. So we also have our veins to do in this flower, and veins will take us a lot of time because again we will be starting with the lighter colors and then we will be going on the darker ones. For example, I have started with light pink. Initially, it was yellow in the first part. If you have seen, it was yellow. Then I have used light pink, then burgundy color, and gray and blue. So all of these colors will be layered up one on top of the other, and it will take some time for us to do it. So let's have our patience intact. And if you can't, then you can take a break and allow the sections to dry up, which is very necessary, and then only move forward. If you finish this, you will be very happy because it's going to turn out very beautiful. And even if it does not, still you will have some learning to go with you, which you can deploy in the next painting, which you're doing on your own or with me. Okay, so let's begin. Thank you for hearing me out.
I'm going over with pink color in this entire flower now. It is required because I think that we need to go darker, and though I could have used alizarin crimson, I thought pink would look better. And in case you want to add some other darker and richer colors which you need to mix in pale consistency and put over where you need the darkness in the flower, you will have to put your reference image which I have shared on your mobile device or any other device and expand and look at it so that you can understand at what part you are in and does that part require any further darkening. In my flower, the stage is such that it requires darkening all over the place. That is why I have mixed a pale mix of pink, and this pink also has slight bit of magenta, which is what I am darkening. I will be darkening and I am darkening the entire flower with. At places where we do not see a crisp edge but we see these diffused shapes, there we can go on with diffused images, diffused shapes as well with our brush. I'm using a smaller brush because I'm trying to observe carefully as to where do I need to go dark, and I'm placing my colors only in those areas. So I'm using a smaller brush, size 0, 1, 2, whatever you have, you can use any of those. This is another step in layering. Here also I see that we will need to go, in fact the entire flower needs darkening. Be careful while you're doing the edges. Here besides the darkish part, there is a slightly lighter section which I see in my reference image. So the dark is well settled towards the right side of my brush. So I am going over the left side of that brush to darken the area outside of this very dark zone. Here again I see little reddish tinge, but since I had applied yellow previously as an underpainting, so if you put pink also, then you will get the reddish image. You can also use red. All of these areas need darkening, and this is also called glazing. When we are not wetting down the paper and we are using our colors in a very pale and light mix meaning we mix lot of water and little less of color and glaze it over our flower. In these areas I am trying to darkening the veins, and I have got blue with me, which is what I am using. The veins in the entire flower as well as in this section you see are looking quite light, so I am darkening those veins. You can also use your mix of gray, the mix of gray which we had previously prepared using our primaries, mixing our primary colors. Here right now I am coming down with little bit of pink, but eventually this area will also go dark and I'll be using my gray colors here also. Right now I'm putting in pink and I'm diffusing it a bit onto the flower. Diffusing by using a slight bit of water on my brush and going towards the other section. So that the paint will not look like a clamped down thing. It will become diffused in the area. See, there is no paint in the brush. Here I am lifting some, putting in some paint. Here there is, I am putting in some blue and pink mix. You can also use only pink. Reddish tinge also. Right now these areas are not that dark enough. They will eventually go very dark. And if you see the reference image, you can put in red or any of those colors which will go dark. And because we are using pale consistency, it is fine. If you don't have any other dark colors, you can just mix your alizarin crimson and permanent alizarin crimson and uh, the gray which you have. Look, that area was white and I just covered it with light color. Just beside the central section, I've covered some of these areas with orange. If you don't have orange, you can use yellow. I also don't have orange. I mix red and yellow to create orange. And right now I'm going on with blue and gray to do my veins over here. I've turned the page so that I can have a better hand movement here. I'm constantly looking at the reference image so that I can bring on my veins properly. And none of these veins are complete straight lines, so even if you miss little bit of creating these bluish lines or darkish or grayish lines, it is fine, because none of these lines are complete straight lines. Most of them are not. You will not go wrong because you are doing a very thin small section using a size 0 or size 1 brush. Whenever in doubt, keep looking at the reference image at the exact same place where you are painting. Previously, we had applied pink and red and yellow in all of these areas. Now we are going darker with blue and gray shades. So this area has become quite dark now. It will take quite a bit of time, so we need to have some patience for it. I'm just looking at the reference image and darkening. Here again, it is not only reddish tinge, but there is some grayish color also. That is what I'm putting in. Gray, or you can use blue also. If you distance yourself from the flower, you will see that this area which we are doing now, it is relatively crisper than the rest of the section. In the reference image, you will find that. Go on to the next petal. Still doing the veins on the next petal using our blues and grays darker mixes, or alizarin crimson, and which is mixed with grey. I'm going slow because I need to look at the reference image as well. Also, these are very thin and smaller areas, the veins, so we don't have to go on doing a wet on wet. We can do straight away wet on dry. That is, the paper is dry and we are putting wet paint on it. I'm using blue right now. Any of the blues will work. Cobalt blue is what I'm using. When you put in your grays and blues, you allow the shape of the flower to come up. Just trying to be a bit careful with the veins here, looking at the reference and painting. You see my palette, there is hardly any water because we don't need as much water. Now for the flower center, what we will do is that you take any of the yellows and try to create these dots. You will see in the reference image the right side of this center is darker. So initially when we started, we had put in a layer of pale yellow, and we are going with the second round here. If you have done your sketching properly, you will see that there are certain marks which you need to create. You can just create dots and just dab your finger on those dots. But if you look at this central section broadly with a bird's eye view, you will see that the lower section of this stamen, or whatever it is called, which is protruding, the lower section is relatively darker. So do not go all over it. Just look at the lower section and place in your dots and dab them with your fingers very gently, slightly. Now I'm mixing my permanent alizarin crimson and grey mix. I'm just darkening this section. Look at the reference image, then you will find this lower petal is very dark, almost black, and this one also is almost black. So because these areas were dried, and I do understand that we need to go darker over here, so I put in water and then I used my darker mix. Some of the veining from the previous layers were looking lighter, so I'm going over them once again. This petal is also quite dark. Through layering, we need to darken it. I'm using alizarin crimson and grey. After drying, it is looking like this, so I will lift some of the colors from here with my damp brush because the lower petal needs little bit of removal. So I'm removing the color by gently scrubbing that area from where I needed to lift color and dabbing that area with my tissue. The brush only needs to be wet. It doesn't need to be it needs to be damp, not very wet. I again lifted some color from here. Okay, here again I am lifting some color. I just wet that area and with my brush I went over it twice, thrice. Now I'm going over it again and soaking up the paint from my brush on my tissue paper. Here again lifting some color and removing it on my tissue. Again lifting slight bit, removing on tissue. Wetting this area with water. And removing little bit of color. Doing the same color removal. That's it. And this is how our flower will look eventually, and we need to do according to where we are.